This is Megan, and welcome to Stories in the Woods. Today's forest fact comes from Alex.
Bees do attack the Waggle.
Dancing bees? That sounds very silly. What's next? Tap dancing ants? Wilting butterflies? Oh, hold on, listeners. My daughter is trying to tell me something. It's true. You read about her book? Oh, one about pollinators, I see. My apologies, Alex. It sounds like bees do dance. And it's made me think of a story. Okay, all you humans and forest dwellers, here we go. Maria's first day at the Honeybee Dance Academy did not go well. Maria was a young worker bee living in a humming, active hive nestled in the thick branches of a pine tree. She was on the smallish side and could be rather quiet. In fact, sometimes the other bees would not even notice her in the bustling buzz of the hive work, and she would be bumped and jostled around. "Oh, sorry, didn't see you there," they would say, barely stopping to check if she was okay. Maria hadn't meant to bluster in late that morning, all eyes turning to see what honeybee had dared to break one of the colony's strict rules. A bee always arrives precisely on time, not a minute late nor a minute early. There were over 100 colony rules that all bees in the hive, whether a female worker or a male drone, needed to memorize and follow. Some of them made sense to Maria, like the one about being on time, but others she found a bit more confusing. For example, a bee may linger at the hive entrance for 5 minutes on a weekday, but for 10 minutes on the weekend. Or a honeybee may nod acknowledgement to a bumblebee, but must never engage in a conversation unless it's about the weather. Maria had asked about these during training, but never really got a satisfactory answer beyond, "Well, that's just the way it's always been." Maria and her fellow worker bees were at the Honeybee Dance Academy to be taught an important tool in every bee's toolkit, the Waggle dance. This dance was a series of moves to help other bees locate a vital part of hive life, nectar and pollen. These important elements were found in the fragrant flowers that bloomed and grew around the forest. Sometimes a worker bee would stumble across a rich supply of nectar or pollen, and the Waggle dance helped communicate precisely where to locate it, like a treasure map only bees knew the secret code to. It was all very exciting, and Maria shivered in anticipation. "Welcome to Honeybee Dance Academy." A very prim older bee was standing on a slightly elevated stage. She held a clipboard and was methodically checking off names as bees arrived. "Now that we're all here." At this, she glared over the top of her horn-rimmed glasses directly at Maria. "We shall begin. You will all be learning the difficult yet extremely important dance called the Waggle." Maria giggled and quickly clamped her hands over her mouth. The older bee paused. "Is something amusing?" she asked crossly. Maria shook her head, but laughter still threatened to spill out. Did nobody else find the name, well, a little silly? "I am Madame Mellifera, and I shall be your instructor and guide through the dramatic and exhilarating world of dance." Maria glanced around at the other bees gathered in the cramped honeycomb. Everyone looked very serious, and Maria sighed. It was going to be a long few days. Madame Mellifera had everyone spread out, which was difficult to do in the tiny space, and music suddenly began. Maria jumped. Where was that even coming from? She craned her neck, trying to spot a speaker. Ouch! A bee had bumped into her and she fell on her bottom. "Watch it," growled the other bee. Maria managed to stand up and realized Madame Mellifera was already several steps into the dance. And 1, 2, 3, now wiggle left. Very good, now right. Maria tried her best to follow the complicated steps, but kept tripping over her own feet. This is impossible, she thought to herself. She stopped mid-dance, causing a kerfuffle of tripped bees and tangled antennas. Sorry, my apologies, she said, wincing at the pile-up. Is there a problem? Madame Mellifera had quietly appeared behind Maria, causing her to jump. I don't think I can do this, murmured Maria. Madame Mellifera thoughtfully examined the young bee over her glasses. You can, and you will. Try again. It was not a question, and Maria took a deep breath and nodded. From the top, cried Madame Mellifera, and the worker bees scrambled back into their positions. They continued to work on the dance for several more hours, until Madame Mellifera finally waved a hand and the mystery music abruptly stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Until tomorrow, she announced and spread her wings and left the honeycomb. The worker bees slowly filtered out, some shuffling for making legs, and others still with spring in their step, chatting to their friends. Maria was about to leave when she heard a sound behind her.
And 1, 2, 3. Oops, not quite, but I'll try again.
It was another worker bee that had stayed behind and was still practicing the steps, her eyes closed in concentration. Maria watched for a few minutes. The bee wasn't much better than Maria, stumbling and twirling the wrong way several times. But there was something about her that drew Maria over. Hello? The bee's eyes flew open at the sound of Maria's voice.
Oh, hello there. Oh, I didn't think anybody was left.
I was just about to leave, but may I ask, what are you doing? Practicing. The bee grinned at Maria. Oh, don't you find the dance quite hard?
Oh, yes, but practice makes things easier.
Maria considered this rather different attitude the worker bee had to her own. I suppose so, but don't you want to, give up when you can't get the steps? The worker bee thought about it.
Well, I guess a little, but then I remind myself that my mistakes are helping me learn. You think Madame Mellifera knew the dance right away?
The bee laughed at the idea, which seemed quite preposterous to her. Actually, I guess I sort of did, Maria admitted. The worker bee shook her head.
Nope. I asked some of the older bees, and they said it took her several weeks to get the hang of it.
Is that right? This was a revelation to Maria. She made it look so easy.
Well, better get back to practicing,
the bee said, turning around. Maria thought about staying, but she had a shift of foraging coming up and didn't want to be late twice in one day. Okay, well, see you tomorrow. She waved, but the other bee was already back to waggling, eyes closed tight and counting aloud.
And 1, 2, 3.
The next day, the bees once again returned to the Honeybee Dance Academy. Madame Mellifera strutted onto the stage and surveyed the bees. Today we shall put into practice what we have learned. Everybody, partner up. There was a buzz of excitement around the room as bees turned to friends and partnerships were made. Maria looked around and noticed the bee from yesterday. She was still standing alone, so Maria hesitantly took a step her way. Would you like to be my partner?
Oh, sure,
the bee smiled.
This is going to be fun.
I guess. Maria wasn't so sure. She still hadn't quite mastered some of the steps.
I'm Lexi,
the cheerful bee said. Maria gave her a smile that she hoped seemed more confident than how she was feeling inside. Madame Mellifera had one partner from each group gather around her. Maria was in the first group. Her wings thrummed nervously. We shall fly to a nearby location with a delicious store of nectar, Madame Mellifera announced to the group. You shall fly back and waggle for your partner. They will try and locate the spot based on your dance. She spread her wings with a flourish. Let us fly. The group followed obediently behind their instructor. It was quiet except for the low bzzz of their wings, as all the bees concentrated on where they were flying to. Finally, Madame Mellifera landed lightly on a cluster of bright yellow flowers low to the ground. They smelled divine, and the foragers all chattered to one another with excitement.
Ooh, they're beautiful.
Do you see all that pollen?
I bet these taste extra sweet.
Madame Mellifera gave one of her sternest glares yet over her glasses. And now, my protégés, waggle. The foragers made a literal beeline back to the hive, everyone racing one another to be the first to perform the dance. Maria was bumped sideways by another bee and flew right into a vibrant red flower that covered her in pollen. Achoo! She sneezed a puff of yellow pollen into the air. She sat on the flower head and considered giving up. But she thought of Lexi waiting back at the academy. She knew if it was Lexi, she would probably say something like,
Oh dear, well, a little extra pollen never hurt anyone.
Maria's mouth set into a determined line. She spread her wings and launched back into the air, a bit wobbly from being knocked sideways and still sneezing pollen. She was dead last to make it back to the dance academy. Some of the bees were already halfway through their waggle. She landed in front of Lexi, who smiled encouragingly at her. Maria began her dance, but she was still rather dizzy, and she might have waggled right instead of left, or left instead of right a few times. She wasn't sure, but Lexi took off and Maria waited nervously. Several minutes later, a brown bug came buzzing back into the hive and landed in front of Maria. Maria blinked in confusion until it dawned on her that underneath the sticky, stinky goo was...
Lexi?
Lexi was covered in mud and wiped a bunch from her eyes.
No problem, Maria. Try again.
Maria felt terrible. She must have gotten mixed up somewhere. She closed her eyes and tried again, but she couldn't help thinking to herself, I'm never going to get this. Lexi took off again, maybe a little less cheerful than before, but Maria might have been imagining this, and returned much later this time. The good news was she was no longer brown and covered in mucky mud. The bad news was she appeared to be sopping wet, her antennas hanging limp. Ooh, not right again? Maria winced. I'm so sorry, Lexi.
It's okay, Maria,
Lexi said, her positive spirit much less damp than her wings.
Might I make a suggestion?
Maria nodded. She could certainly use the help. The rest of the Waggle pairs had succeeded in their goal of getting their partner to the flower, and they were all now milling about, waiting, or watching the struggling last pair of bees with barely concealed disdain.
Maybe try changing how you're thinking about the Waggle dance.
Thinking?
Yeah, see, if you tell yourself you can't, or I'll never get it, you are actually less likely to keep giving things a try. And the thing is, you have to keep trying to get better and find success.
Maria considered Lexi's idea. She supposed she could be rather negative about things she found hard. She decided to give it a try. I haven't figured out the Waggle dance yet, she said out loud. Lexi smiled and nodded her encouragement, so Maria continued. But with some work, I will? The last bit came out as a bit of a question, but strangely, Maria was already starting to feel better. She took a deep breath and launched into the Waggle again.
Ooh, that bush was really prickly.
And again.
Did you know squirrels are really protective of their nuts?
And, well, and again.
It was a close call with that spider.
But by the sixth try, Lexi came floating back into the hive to complete silence. Maria braced herself for another failure, but then reminded herself, even if I don't get it this time, I'll keep trying. There was no need, however, as Lexi gave her a big smile.
I knew you could do it, Maria.
The entire group of worker bees erupted into applause and congratulations for Maria, some of them even lifting her in the air in celebration. Maria glanced at Madame Mellifera and thought she caught the smallest hint of a smile from the stoic instructor. By the end of her week at Honeybee Dance Academy, Maria was feeling much better about the Waggle, and she had even made a friend in the process, despite sending her on multiple wild bee chases. Lexi was a loyal and upbeat friend and was helping Maria retrain her brain, so she was much more comfortable making mistakes. Maria knew that with a bit of work and perseverance, she could accomplish almost anything. Although, maybe it was best she took a little break from learning any more dancing. I am so glad that Maria was persistent in our story. That means tried again and again until she figured out the Waggle dance. Hold on, listeners. My daughter's trying to get my attention again. What? My story makes no sense. Because the bees talk so they could just tell each other where the flower was? No, I'm not going to rewrite it. They can just use their imagination. Sorry about that. Where were we? Oh, yes. Lexi was teaching Maria how to have a growth mindset. That means training our brain to understand that mistakes are part of learning, and if we persevere and practice, we will get better at things. Let's play a little game to practice. Can you and your grown-up figure out which of these thoughts would help our brains grow, and which ones stop our brain from learning? I'll never figure this out. It's too hard. That's right. Stop us from learning. Everyone makes mistakes. It's a chance for me to learn. Good job. Grow. I already know everything about math. There's nothing else for me to learn. That's right. Stop your brain from learning. I will try something new today. It will take time to figure out. Good. Grow your brain. And last one. I can't do it yet. That's right. Grow your brain. Stories in the Woods are original stories by me, Megan Schmitz. Thank you to Alex for today's forest fact. If you would like to send me an interesting fact about a forest plant or animal, please email me at storiesinthewoodspodcast@gmail.com. That's storiesinthewoodspodcast@gmail.com. You can find me at Littles in the Woods on Instagram or Facebook for nature play and tips for getting little explorers outside. Thanks for joining me. I can't wait to meet again for another story in the woods.